This is the OGM weekly call for Thursday, December 19th, 2024. We're running right up onto Christmas. Next week's call, I think, is on Christmas. We need to sort of sort some of that out. I'm just back from Australia, where I gave a couple talks that were relatively similar, which is a new talk. It's not all new content. It's some of the pieces are things I've said before, clearly. But it worked really well. And a piece of it is about the boundary between the possible and impossible. So that's kind of a theme for me these days when I talk, is there's a bunch, if you had told me 20 years ago that a stranger drove me someplace 10 times last week in their car, because I consulted a device that solicited the car and is connected to the internet and is also a high definition theater, you would have said, yeah, that's pretty impossible. And yet we take it so for granted now that nobody raises an eyebrow that I did that. And that's technology stuff. But I'm really interested in other constraints. I'm interested in social constraints, cultural constraints, mental constraints, all that kind of stuff. And then I sink into the concept of constraints, and I go explore. I kind of bounce around in that space for a while, thinking about the nature of constraints. I tell a lot of stories uh, of constraints overcome, stuff like that. That's kind of the general gist of it. And it's fun because a lot of the stories are just really old hat for me. And Wikipedia is a story I refer to just a lot because everybody's touched the Wikipedia. And when I ask groups, I'll say, who here used the Wikipedia in the last month? 98% of the hands go up. Who here remembers the moment you figured out how Wikipedia works? And I'll get like half the hands will go up. I'll be like, how did you feel? Did your throat tighten? Did your sphincter tighten? What do you mean any idiot on the planet can go change this encyclopedia I've been using as reference, right? And then I explore what that means and how the Wikipedia works, how it was born, all that kind of stuff. And that makes it's a retellable story. That's a phrase from Jay Golden, who's one of a few storytellers I know. Michael Margolis is another one. I know a bunch of people who make a living helping other people tell stories. And Jay talks about retellable stories, which is like, how do you leave something with somebody where it's easy for them to remember the details and tell their friends and colleagues roughly the gist of the same story. So I try to do that with Wikipedia, with a bunch of other things. Um, Ask me more questions. Gil, you're muted.
But you can tell that I'm talking. How long is the speech?
The speeches ran an hour.
Uh-huh. Interactive?
Yes, I
In
hate
Q&A or interactive, or how do you do that?
I hate droning on for an hour. So in the middle of the speech, I do a bunch of things. One thing I do that I like a lot is because I'm exploring this boundary between the possible and the impossible. I say, hey, name things that we think are completely normal that would have seemed impossible to your great grandparents or maybe even great great grandparents. Just go back several generations. And that's a very, very easy list. Like I climbed into a metal cylinder to get here. International air travel would have seemed impossible. The internet, smartphones, all that kind of stuff. But then I flip the question and
Mhm.
I say, now let's flip it. What things do we take? What things do we think are impossible that our great great grandparents would have thought were completely normal? And
Mm,
the first item on that list that gets groans from people is kids could roam freely.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you think Wikipedia is, one, overdone and two, not representative?
Um, so Wikipedia is among the top 10 most visited websites consistently year after year. It's the only one that doesn't leave any cookies on your browser. It is a reference. You no longer have to walk to a public library, hope they have go hope the Britannica has something on what you want or some other
It's the
encyclopedia.
story. What I meant is the story overdone and not representative of what's happening in the rest of the world?
Mm,
It's a story of the commons, which we have obliterated. It's a story of our volunteers pulling something off that nobody thought they could actually keep going. It has survived many eras of, oh, Wikipedia is dead and overdone. I think Wikipedia is underdone. I don't know. I think Wikipedia is a cultural phenomena of our day. I think Wikipedia is sort of sui generis, meaning it's a one-off example. Wikipedia unfortunately ate the wiki space. When you try to talk about, hey, let's use a wiki to collaborate, it's hard. That conversation doesn't get a lot of traction. I was pretty sure back in the day when Pete and others were founding Social Text, I was pretty sure that today we would collaborate heavily on collective group edited websites, and we don't,
Mhm.
right?
But that's not my question. My question is that story overdone? And is it such a one-off that is unlike so many other things?
So I just tried to answer your question three ways. I'll ask someone else to step forward and answer it for you.
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that was easy. Damn, I wish I'd done that first. Um,
Jerry, when you started talking about the boundary between the possible and the impossible, my
Yeah.
first thought is that it lives somewhere between here and here.
okay, how do you mean that?
I mean, in my head.
Oh, okay. What is there a difference between your left and right ears?
No, it's
I'm
just
teasing.
I'm indicating the space of my brain, and I'm violating my basic directives because I don't think this happens in the brain, but it's in the interpretations that I'm living in is where the possible and impossible mostly lives. I mean,
Oh, for sure.
at a certain level, it's engineering, but we know that bees can't fly, etc. So, fuck that.
Right. Yes, and one of my other little tropes is that, a lot of constraints are physical or legal or cultural, but it turns out most constraints are mental.
Mhm.
That this is stuff happening in our heads, and if we can figure out how to shift what's happening in our heads, how to shift your point of view, all of a sudden a lot of stuff that seems impossible comes into view as very possible. And I love that. And Mark, you've patiently had your hand up for a while. Please go ahead. You took your hand down well, but you did not unmute. And I would, yeah.
There we go.
Okay, much better.
Yeah, so a tiny bit of silence. Yay. Happy to be back. Um, One very quick process question. I'm eating some breakfast, and uh, we talked a number of weeks ago about basically stopping the video. I'm happy to be on video. I notice a couple people are not on video. Was there a decision or a preference that was decided on for our
Um,
meetings?
so I don't know that we have never thought of having a policy about whether or not people's video is on or not. I think what was happening, Mark, was you were doing a lot of things on video that were extremely distracting, and we were in a pretty serious subject. And I was asking you, and I'm asking you today, to self-regulate.
You got it.
If you want to have some cereal on camera, I'm good with that. It does not bother me for you to go munch, munch, munch on the camera. That is not a problem. It's the other stuff that you were doing was actually quite disruptive.
I was making a point. That point was pretty much taken.
It was.
That was not meant to be unkind on my part or
And
disrespectful.
and I understand that entirely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, to the point, my goodness, there are many, in my experiences, starting with a well back in the late 80s.
Yay.
Yay. Boy, oh boy, was that amazing. It was a second life that basically introduced me to so many amazing people. Meetings with remarkable people.
Mhm.
There's a film, Meetings with Remarkable Men, that talks about how Gurdjieff met his mentors. And boy, did I meet mentors on the well. There's a book, I think Everything is Miscellaneous, but there it might be the wrong book. And I don't remember the author, but it's an amazing book.
Stephen Berlin Johnson, one of his?
No, 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 no.
Okay. David Weinberger.
Yes, David Weinberger, amazing book. And I don't know if it's actually that book or one of the others, like, there's another luminary who talks about excess cognition that could be freed up by people not watching television and actually doing things like Wikipedia. One of these books mentions the Swifties, Taylor Swift's community, and they're powerful and they're together. They have a community that's real, and it's really an online community. And there are many, baking sites, and I accidentally signed up for a site called not Dolly Madison, but Ashley Madison.
Oh,
Oh,
the
God.
basically have an affair site?
I thought it was a dating site.
How'd
And
that go?
It is.
It
I
is
wrote
kind
this
of.
very nice, I'm an honest person, Eagle Scout, no cheating. And then I later find out that it's the affair site for people who want to cheat. And I'm going,
Uh-huh.
oh no, this is terrible.
Did you get
And
any traffic?
my God, yes. Oh, I haven't answered any of this deluge of traffic. And, it's kind of daunting, actually. Women from 41 to 75. And my, to very shortly go into personal land, I'm focused on healing. And, part of healing is being social. That's why I'm here. I'm not expecting you to be my therapist but, it's healing to have connection. And we have some connection here. I care about what's happening in Kevin's life and in North Carolina. Um, I've been in the hospital, so I haven't been able to help, but I'm hoping to, you know, see what I can do among Catholic charities and other groups that might be able to send some resources that way eventually. Now, I'm not going to prioritize that over my own healing. Sorry, Kevin. But here we are. We're a bunch of really intelligent, compassionate people who know resources that don't know about specific needs in specific local areas. Or say me, specific people, specific kinds of healing of trauma or cancer or what have you. So these are stories. The Internet Archive, when I was with them, and I still feel like I, am very, very aligned with them. They're looking for stories. They're looking for repeatable stories. They're looking for short, bounded narratives. How did this help me? But also, as a UX designer, I'm looking for stories. I tried to do this and I couldn't. I'm looking for what you might call negative stories, or what do they call them in design? Forgive my brain. Case studies. Okay, I tried to do this and I was successful. And I'm a researcher in ancient religions, or I'm a researcher in Perscovites, or some kind of um, metal vapor deposition, and I found these patents, and I found these books, and etc. So I encourage you, Jerry, rock on, mighty narrative focused person. But I'd also remind you that narratives aren't systems. That systems are what makes the world run. That the Constitution isn't a story. The Constitution is a set of rules. Now, stories are used to bend the Constitution, and they have been, unfortunately. And there's an addiction in our cognitive makeup, our cultural makeup. Not all cultures are so story-based. But we have media, and boy, oh boy, can they move a story. And
You have wandered us into our topic space
yeah,
very
hopefully.
nicely,
Thank you.
Which
Please.
I appreciate. Let me go to Stacy first, and then I'll sort of pick up the thread that you just left on the table. Go ahead, Stacy.
Thank you. So since this call started, my mind went in two different directions, but I think I'm going to go in the one of challenging an assumption that was made. Hold on a minute, because I think it's important. When you said that children could play outside safely years ago, we all seem to agree.
I didn't say that they could play outside safely. I said we let them roam. There's just sort of a difference to me. Like there was still stuff going on. It wasn't always safe outside, but go ahead.
And I'm glad you bring up that distinction, but I still think that most of us would tend to agree that things were safer. Maybe that's not true, which I'm glad because it's not true. What I wanted to share is that so I grew up with a very fearful mother, and I can only assume that she saw a lot of things that she wouldn't even want to share with me. She grew up very poor and she grew up female. So I was trained from a very early age not to talk to strangers, not to go where it's dark, things like that. That being said, how many children have been molested by coaches and friends and family members? Um, so I just want to challenge this idea that in the past, things weren't exactly. I don't, I'm just going to leave it at that. I think I've made it clear what I'm trying to say. All stories are different. And, especially, I think, especially between the sexes, there seems to be a difference in the stories that we come up with. Not that it's limited to the sexes, but the way the stories get told is limited. So I'll stop there.
Stacey, thank you. And you're also actually heading right where I was hoping we would head in this conversation. Because every story or every scenario or every case study or every whatever we're going to call it, every setting has a series of contexts, a series of facts, a series of forces, all these things are interacting. And when we tell a little story, we can't cite all of them. We can't paint the complete picture. We're only going to paint the little impressionist thing of whatever it is we're mentioning about it. And it helps a lot to deepen things. Uh, and let me back up for 1 second just into the topic the way I wanted to bring it in. We're at a very weird moment in history right now, in American history in particular. We just went through I think a traumatic election cycle that for a lot of people is really dangerous and really deeply traumatic and poses sort of existential threats of different kinds. The new administration hasn't even stepped in to take office, and it's already having a huge influence on world affairs and on things that are happening on the ground. We post with one another on the OGM list and in lots of other places. We interact here on our calls, and we have several different kinds of calls. I'm sure many of us have side conversations, etc. And I'm very interested in the quality and nature of our conversations and how we go about it. I would like us to try to connect more of the threads or to say more of what's going on in our heads as we approach these different subjects. And I don't mean, hey, let's map more of this and let's have a mapathon kind of thing. I really kind of mean how can we be more considered and more thorough and honor more complexity and be more explicit in our conversations with one another here. And feel free to riff on this or correct me or add terms or whatever else. But Ken, you've been posting a lot of articles about complexity to the OGM list and about how efficiency, sorry, the word I should have said is efficiency, and about how efficiency can be dangerous and so forth. And I think you're doing so because you have other issues in mind that are about maybe it's the Doge department that Musk is going to run in his quest for efficiency. I'm not sure, but I'd love to make those connections in our conversations a bit more explicit. Those were my assumptions reading some of the things you had shared with us. But I'm interested in us stepping up our game for sense making in some collaborative way, but also creating a space where, and this is another important aspect of it, where we're not reacting in a knee-jerk way because we're following an emotional link that we've dug, or an emotional hole we've dug for a while, and now things are just miserable, but rather just trying to come into the moment in some realistic but connected way. We have the benefit of a lot of time together and a lot of trust in the group. We have the benefit of a lot of ability to sort of hang with each other in these moments. And I'm trying to see if we can bank on that and make it better. Mark, I'm going to meter you a little bit today so that you're not taking up so much airtime during the call. So I will come back to you, but I'm unclear that you can say a very short thing. Do you want to try it? Go for it.
Thank you. All models are wrong. All stories are incomplete. They separate the world into what is the story, what's outside the story, what's inside the story, and what is the story. That's basic systems from Buckminster Fuller. And people use that. People basically say, yeah, you didn't cover everything in your story about Wikipedia, so you're bad. That's it. It's a tactic. It works. That's it.
Thanks, Mark. Klaus.
Yeah, I would say that one thing that characterizes our group here is that we look at current phenomena through the lens of a historic perspective. Right? So we're looking back in time. We're looking at the evolution of thought, the evolution of knowledge of mankind in general. So when we look at what is happening around us today, it rings like a bell to things that we know work out in certain ways. And we also know that the worst thing to do is to be quiet and stand by and think it's not going to impact us and maybe it's going to go away. And reality is it's not, right? I mean, it sounds almost ridiculous now, but I was born in 1949 in Germany, and I grew up during a time when Germans in general were in a deep sense of self-reflection about what in the world happened here, and how could my parents engage in this, right? So we really, which is one reason why Germany is in such a bind today, because we were like radical pacifists, right? No more war, never, don't rearm, and all of those things. And so today, I mean, what we are observing there is it's crazy. I mean, it's radical, right? It's coming in much faster than even our worst expectations could have expected. And to stand by idle and not at least voice, your thoughts and your insights and understanding should not be an option. I mean, we should not be fearful, about posting our opinions or posting a video and all of those things, because that's what happens throughout history on so many examples. And so, I mean, I can't even imagine how this current scenario is going to resolve itself, because you're actually looking at the potential of having a global impact on economies and on our collective well-being. This is playing out in ways that is just unfathomable, and so. The crisis that we're entering, I think, hasn't really been processed yet, because you have some billionaire who has no ethical boundaries, no emotional boundaries, coming in with making decisions that that are impacting people in ways that I'm sure this guy can't even process. And so I think this is a time to. I think the best way for us to respond is to be, as Jerry, be thoughtful and responsible, but bring transparency to this process. Help people understand what is happening who don't live in historic perspectives and who don't engage in philosophical endeavors where they just live day to day and can't really process what is happening here. So that's maybe the best way for us to be responsible, to be respectful, but also to be determined to maintain focus and to maintain and to provide transparency in reality, to what is actually going on here.
Thanks, Klaus. I agree with like 90% of what you said. I want to pick a little issue with a piece of what you said, which is one thing you said was that Musk, I'm assuming you're talking about Musk, can't process some of the damage that he's probably inflicting on people. And then also that people who don't live with historical perspectives and other kinds of things. And I want to caution us against making broad assumptions or conclusions about other people's state of mind or ability or history or whatever else. I think the people who are doing things that we might find hateful right now, some of them are extremely informed about historical perspectives, and they're trying to catalyze a new historical wave. They're in fact, they have a conflicting theory of how things got to the point we are today. With maybe what we think, and that's disagreement. That's really interesting. The conflicting theories of why to do whatever we want to do. I'm really super interested in that, but I don't know that they're ahistoric or very likely Musk is autistic or something on the spectrum somewhere. I don't know, but it's really hard for me to. I can point to his actions and say, "Gosh, that was really dumb." Like what he did to Twitter once he took over it. But after a while of watching him do what he was doing with Twitter, I ended up thinking, oh, what he wants to do is maybe destroy Twitter, but take down as much of current democracy as he can in the process. And that worked for me for a while as logic. Let me go Gil, then Alex, because I saw Gil's hand up first. So I'll go Gil and then Alex.
Yeah. It's possible for somebody to be very strategic, even in ways that we can't fathom, and also unable to process certain kinds of things. So, and Musk may be an example. I'd point you to Seth Abramson's extensive biographies on both Musk and Trump, kind of deep and scary. The man's not random.
I was reading some of Abramson's latest sort of post on Musk, and parts of it seemed very ad hominem. He was just like in there swinging wildly, and I'm like, this is not a great, this is not, and I don't want purely objective, but he's just gone off the deep end on his thesis, I think.
Maybe so. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot there. I haven't formed a judgment about how much I want to believe of what he's writing, but there's interesting stuff there. And I think, the main point I guess I'm trying to raise is that there's arguments from Abramson and others that Musk and Kimball and Father have been quite strategic for decades about what they're up to.
Yeah.
And kind of like a crazed Superman genius world domination plan. And how he relates to human beings is a particular way. Somebody, who was it? I was watching somebody yesterday. Oh God, who was this? It was some wise strategic business management guru person saying that it might have been Isaacson, saying that it's really interesting that people who have worked for Musk either say, this is the greatest experience in my life, I will never work with him again. Or this is the worst experience in my life, I will never work with him again. Whereas people who work with Zuckerberg say, I will work with him again. Oh, it was Reid Hoffman. It was a really interesting reflection by Reid Hoffman.
Huh.
And Hoffman said, you know, when people ask me for references, I say talk with anybody I've ever worked with. Because, you know, they may like things and not like things. They may have judgments and disagreements, but generally they'll, you know, see that I'm an upstanding person who cares about da 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 da. So
Right.
the thing about Musk that strikes me is that we all thought that the Twitter purchase was insanely stupid and that he wasted all this money and like spent $44 billion for a company that's worth 10 or whatever it is now. I think it's one of the best M&A deals in human history. You know, he for $33 billion, he's bought an entire fucking country.
It's an interesting argument.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Thanks,
Done.
Gil. Alex.
Hi, not as you're all well read and everything, but this is partly personal experience. I was born in Africa. I lived in Africa till I was 20 odd years old. There is a difference in culture and approach. I've also lived and worked in South Africa. It's difficult to explain to people how direct South Africans and generally the directness of the interactions are. I don't know about, you know, personally, I didn't like Elon at all. I still don't like him, but I actually think he's achieved many things. Twitter and politics accepted, I don't much care about that. But I think people don't quite, I mean, you said he might be autistic or whatever, but the mere directness of the interaction of the person will grate most of the Western world. Literally. He doesn't have to do anything. He will upset you just because of the way he talks. There's something about, you know, I'm also Greek for all my other things that I am. In Greek language, we don't say thank you for many things. We say thank you when there's some thank you is needed. You know, over here, you know, my wife will give me a cup of tea, will say thank you. In Greece, you won't say thank you for a cup of tea because it's implied by the act of accepting it or something like that. So I'm just merely suggesting that a lot of Elon Musk's personality issues have to do with this cultural difference that, you know, if you're like that, if you're like me and you're like that, because I didn't achieve the success that Elon Musk has, I have to adjust and become one of you guys, let's say. But Elon Musk has no brakes. He's become so successful. He doesn't, you know, maybe it's the mark of a not a nice man, but he doesn't have to kowtow to anyone. He doesn't have to be nice to anyone. So it'll amplify his inner interactivity, if you like, methodology, rather than put brakes on it. Just a thought. I don't know. You know, it may be relevant, but anybody sort of think that's relevant? I don't know.
I like it. Go ahead, Stacey. Oh, you were just raising in support.
Yeah, what comes to mind is that the way you express your intentions, you know, may be debatable, but what are your intentions, right? So the challenge here really is what are Musk's true intentions here? Where does this guy want to go? And he appears to be drunk on power at this point when you watch him and you watch his facial expressions and when he's around Trump. So he could be super polite, he could be super slick, he could be abrasive, like you're describing the African mentality. That's a secondary issue. You know, the thing is, where does this guy want to go? What does he think he's going to achieve? You know?
I totally agree. Just to not, you said African mentality. It is not. It's a white colonial African mentality. Let's clarify that. It's not the same as African mentality because it's totally different. It's that colonial side of things.
Makes sense.
I posted something from Google AI. I was trying to find the term that I had heard many analysts talk about the rise of, unfortunately, Adolf Hitler. And he's an opportunist. And what I see in the entire MAGA mindset is, hey, let's get what we can get. And that's not a commons kind of perspective. That's very Ayn Rand, greed is good. This has been going on for a very, very long time.
Thanks, Mark. Where would we like to go from here? What do you want to talk about the quality of our conversations? Do you want to talk about these topics that we've got on the table? Help me steer or suggest a path of inquiry. Stacy.
Regardless of which way you decide to go, I would just like to say one thing, which is side swiping a little bit, which is an alternative to what's happening with government, which is what's happening with Kevin on the ground, which is the space that I'm playing in right now. I mean, I used to follow, I have no idea what's happening in politics right now. I truly have no idea, other than like headlines that I might see, and once in a while, like I was curious about what's happening with the drones. But other than that, I have no idea. But what I do know is on the ground, and not just with Kevin, because I'm 4 hours away and I'm seeing the pieces and, playing my chess game here. But I see people from different political persuasions. They don't even necessarily know where the other one stands, who voted for what, but coming together around their neighborhoods and common interests and working together. And I think that's where the focus needs to be. And again, weeding out those people that are the rotten apples of the group, for lack of a better word.
How do you mean weeding out those people?
All right, so you might find this interesting. So some of you know that, I'm staying with somebody who was very MAGA. Now she's just not political. So when I would come down here, I would get invited to Christmas parties and sorts. And there was like Trump hanging on the wall, the whole bit. Well, this time I didn't get invited to a party. And I thought that was like really weird. And then she showed me a text conversation, and this woman who I didn't like from the beginning, she was the only woman that I said there's something not right with her. And I couldn't convince my friend of that. This woman told her that if I came to the party and they found out that I was the opposition, it would be bad for everyone. I looked at I said, does that sound normal to you? I mean, it's very bizarre. That being said, I know so the woman's now having another party that she wants me to come to, and I suspect it's because the other people in her group really like me, because I'm a really nice person and I get along with them, and she's hearing from thank you, and she's hearing from other members of the group. So I'm not the opposition anymore. But so somebody like her is somebody that I would say needs to be weeded out. And I don't mean excluded. I just mean not in the inner circle that's part of policy making and decision making and things like that. So does that make sense?
I think I know what you mean better. Thank you. And you're going somewhere that I find really interesting and want to emphasize, which is we get spun up a lot and talk a lot about politics and government with a big G, and what they're doing and what they're doing to us and the effects of all that kind of stuff. The stuff that's happening on the ground in communities like Kevin is doing around Swannanoa and all of that is massively important, but it's not just important, it's quite possibly the conduit, vessel, vehicle setting for how to cause change at a really large scale in the future. It's very likely that ignoring the goddamned capital P politics and capital G government for a while might pay off better. I don't even know what language to use, but might be more fruitful for making better lives, which is one of my goals. I'd like to see, I'd like to see us help make lives better someplace. Mark, go ahead.
Stacy, I've run up against diversity equity and inclusion. And I had a great conversation with Ken Homer, who talked about belonging, justice, and oh, I forget, but basically everybody has equal rights, equal
You know,
should have access to belonging, justice, and Ken, if you could help me out, I forgot the third one, but
Dignity.
dignity. Thank you. Human dignity. Stacey, is there a way that both of you could be in the same room together?
both of who?
You and the what you had
Of course.
metaphorically talked to as a rotten apple.
Oh, absolutely. We could be in the same room together.
Yeah. I mean, it's this kind of inclusion, which, boy, oh boy, we're including all our people and none of them.
But
It's another thing.
I have to say, Mark, because and if you don't mind, Jerry,
Hmm.
because it does start on this ground level. Like, so right now, from a social point of view, I'm somebody that's wanted in the room. They want me there. They like me. I don't want to give my energy there. She doesn't deserve my energy. And I think it's important that we value our energy that way because hear me out, Jerry, because too much of what happens, and this is the issue that I have with a professional space versus a play space, and why I think we're better off in a play space where we are more authentic. When we come to a professional space, most people wear a mask. So I heard somebody talking about how, well, we show up differently in different spaces. Well, why? I don't. I'm telling you, whatever space you find me in, this is who you're going to find. And I actually think that's a better way to be. Too many of us are willing to negotiate ourselves because we see an opportunity. And that's what empowers people like Musk, who I heard, the phrase drunk with power. That's what allows people to get away with those things and it builds up. And even the most well-intentioned people fall into that trap. And I think that's why I speak out as much as I do, which I don't always like to do. But just to remind even the really nice people that we know about those power dynamics. I mean, if there's an invitation, there's only 4 seats available. There's no way that each of us are equally wanted in those 4 seats. So like when Mark says we're all equal, no, we're not all equal. We're not. I mean, context matters, but we're not all equal.
I think that I think what Mark was saying and what Ken was saying is that ideally we should treat everyone equally in different ways. Not that the facts on the ground say that anybody's equal, because clearly that ain't happening.
I completely agree. I would never say that I am a woman. I would never say that I'm equal to a woman. I can never give birth. I can never do so many things that so many people in this virtual room can do. We're not equal. We're different. And to honor that diversity as a Mexican American with very passionate parents, I was an anthropologist in my career, and I kept my professional demeanor, but I don't have that ability anymore. I'm tired. I don't have the ability to control my emotions the way I did in my professional career. I wouldn't say I wore a mask. I say I adapted to the environment that was paying a heck of a lot of money for me to solve problems. And I don't feel bad at all about that.
Klaus.
Yeah, along the same lines, my son just lost his job. He got hired as head of corporate talent branding for Samsara. When the company had like 1,500 people, they're now pushing 5,000. And he was overseeing their DEI effort as part of his branding, the talent branding part. He was also leading the LGBTQ teams, and he's gone. you know. And unceremoniously, got moved out of the company.
Wow.
But And the company is going after the Elon Musk model, right? The CEO of the company very much wants to embrace, this kind of management style, which, leads to rapid success. Independent of, apart from that, my thought is that there is so much energy in the economy. I mean, the dynamics in the food and agriculture sector, which, where I'm engaging. And I really appreciate you posting these two articles, Jerry, because they made a big round, but I hadn't picked up on it. I didn't think of using this as a catalyst to take a deep dive and review that.
Mm-hmm.
The assumption in the article are that the economy is static and that you can't change people, and so there is a linear way of thinking about these systems, which are anything but. And so when you get into the economy and you're working with farmers, for example, we now have the capacity to connect with thousands of farmers almost instantly and explain to them what's happening in the political process, what's happening with the Farm Bill, how is this impacting, their well-being, the need for them to reinvent basically how they are treating their soil and how they're engaging in the economy. So there are oodles, of local efforts, community-based efforts to change community systems. And what's missing is a connection that would allow this to scale on a national level and even on an international level. And there are a lot of people now who would want to make that happen, right? So we are getting launched in January on an effort to bring together a communications platform that connects these local communities to a central database that has best available science, best available tools, a network of connections of innovators that are in this sphere. So a ground-up, a bottom-up effort, and I could keep calling it connecting a coalition of the willing. People who are engaged and they want to see this happen, want to make this happen. I mean, we had a presentation last week to the Wallace Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Tom Steyer Foundation, and everybody is like, yeah, this is really great, but I don't think that companies are so excited about seeing this kind of structural change coming their way because it alters their business model. But I think that's the point of engagement. That's the point of as providing thought leadership, where you can paint a path, because people are really willing, they're really eager, to push forward. People want this kind of change. They understand that this kind of change is necessary, but the inertia in the system is extremely difficult, to work around on. So I think if we can focus, on the human aspect of change, on the connections, on maybe a systems approach to building a platform that is AI supported, best available information, best available knowledge. That may be the best way to engage. And no one needs to go into the streets to protest. No one needs to do anything out of the ordinary. This is really a path to create revolutionary change without calling it that, or without even taking that mindset.
Mm-hmm. Plus, one of the things I love and appreciate about trying to help with your journey is that, just by definition, being in the food system, you have to approach a bunch of people who are very differently minded than, it's a spectrum, right? And a lot of people who are probably a lot more conservative. And you make a great effort to figure out how to do that, how, how to reframe your approach, how to talk to people, how to find a common issue. Hey, we care about water health, it turns out, or soil health. And that's pretty far away from the fights that are happening above at the levels that I'm in this conversation sort of trying to steer us away from the politics and government kind of things, which is great. But then every now and then the two worlds intermix and get really tangled up, as in the Farm Bill or whatever else. And those things have to happen. Those conversations have to happen. I'm wondering, Hank or Jose, if either of you would like to just I'm having a feeling that your perspectives on where we are in this conversation might be useful to us. I don't know why, but if either of you would like to comment, I'd love that. Go ahead, Hank, and then Jose. You will have to unmute yourself, however.
Sorry. As a comment as a meta comment to what I've been hearing and what I've been enjoying as this dialoguing today is a standpoint from Europe. I don't know if any of you are aware, but news media in lots of countries in Europe is preparing Europe for war. The Secretary General of the NATO gave a speech last week where he says Europe is going to be in a shooting war before the decade is out, and you have to get your act together. It's all over the Dutch papers. It's all over the media in Finland. So it's a kind of meta comment on the conversations that we're having here, and perhaps finding some way to bring them in to the attention of people in the public realm. Just what's happening in Europe is very frightening, because if you prepare people for war, well, then they're prepared, and it's not going to be such a shock to them anymore. So I have to leave the call in about 10, 15 minutes, but I thought I would bring that in because I've always believed that OGM has so much to say on the level of the public conversation. And however we can enter that conversation, I think it's really important for us.
Please raise your hand if you were aware of this. If like the news in Europe doing this was common to you. I'm totally unaware. So Hank, thank you. Can you say just a little bit more, like paint the picture a little bit more for us?
Well, the Secretary General of the NATO is a Dutch politician, so we got lots of follow up and follow through here. But I subscribe to a rather left-wing daily paper, and virtually every day for the last 2 or 3 weeks, there are articles about how the government recommends that everyone starts building a survival kit and stockpiling fresh water in plastic barrels. And
wow.
Whether that's good or bad, it's in the news every day. And it's like, let's say, the things that Trump and his type say, if you read it every day and you hear it every day, it stops being the big lie and it starts being part of your emotional and intellectual reality. So whereas the Dutch newspapers and the Dutch media are, for my feeling, too full of the awful things that are happening in the world, not enough positive news and a tsunami of negative news. This stuff about preparing yourself for war, I think is well, I'll use the word insidious. It's aimed at changing people's mindset about what can still be avoided, but let's not try to avoid it. Let's let the armaments industry make a lot of money with it. No, that's one man's opinion of Moonlight.
Damn. Let me go to Jose and then Mark.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm suffering with a bit of a cold, so hopefully you guys can understand me.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think everybody's sort of been touching on many of the thoughts that I have, which is everything's a balance, and we've been out of balance for quite a while, and we need to kind of swing back. And it may not seem like it what we're seeing is a proper swing, but you know, you got to overshoot. Every swing overshoots balance, right? It's got to happen. It's that's just the way the physics works. So I see a lot of what we're seeing as that overswing, and whatever is going to happen in the middle somewhere over the next little while. Something, in my opinion, needs to happen. We can't keep going status quo. And I totally support Klaus and his and Kevin and their on the ground stuff. And I don't think that it's just technology. It's not just knowledge that's really going to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big part of it. It is a good part of it, but we really need to talk about a different view of who we are. And if we don't really reframe who we are as human beings, as life, then we're going to keep making these mistakes because we're going to keep misunderstanding ourselves and each other. And I think that's as big as knowledge is. I think that's bigger. And so I think those are the two fronts. So I would agree with a lot of folks. It's like, yes, we need to do it ourselves. Yes, we need to keep an eye out for what's going on, not be, heads in the sand, but not get caught up so much that we don't see what the work that needs to be done is.
Mm-hmm.
And for us to do that work collaboratively as much as we can, because if we don't do that work, when that overswing finally settles, we're not going to be able to do what needs to be done. We're not going to be ready for it.
That pendulum is harsh.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you, Hank. Thank you, Jose. Great insights. I'm an artist, and I see things. Being an artist means you don't have to look away. You don't have to turn your head away when you see a dead bird or war. I study cognition because I'm a cognitive artist. I pay attention to what's the beauty in one's own mind. Not my mind. It's not about me. It's about your minds. What's beautiful about Alistair's thinking? I don't know. Alistair knows. The purpose of art is to educate desire. And desire is really, really tricky. And desire comes in with, do we want a war or not? I would love to have a OGM talk about this one line. If you want peace, study war. I really have a very war study background. My grandparents were in the Mexican Revolution in Aguascalientes, the Battle of Aguascalientes. And the Mexican Constitution is a really interesting instrument. Came out of that time, actually, oddly enough, a guy named Carranza. If you want peace, study war. That's a really interesting. I love Hank. What do you think about that line? I mean, yeah, we got to give it some attention to deterrence, which is a very, conservative notion. And Biden and what is it, Obama have been highly criticized, and I think somewhat fairly, for not having significant deterrence. I don't know. It's a very tricky mental desire. A lot of people, oh my God, I don't want to study war. I understand that. I'm male. I grew up with, you know, Tiger tank models and, blue and whatnot. So I'll leave it here and Hank, what do you think?
Just a curiosity to clarify something, Mark. I Googled that phrase and I got a little bit of a response on that, but I immediately got, if you want peace, prepare for war, which goes back to a Latin Roman saying, si vis pacem para bellum, which I'll put in the chat as well. And that
Yeah, you're right.
there's a lot of hits on prepare for.
Wow, because my dad loved hippies, but he was a defense contractor, and that was how I heard it. Study war.
Fascinating. And is the intention similar to prepare for? Is it different?
Um, Good question. Who's that? There's a very Victor Davis Hanson. I used to admire him, and then he went full MAGA. And he's a, scholar of the Greeks and the Thucydides and all of that. Very, very early. I mean, way before. Oh, who's that German? Anyway, there's many scholars of war, but I was possibly going to go to the Naval Academy, and I think I'd rather study war. And if we need to prepare for war, well, yeah, peace, love, and defense spending. Sorry. Please, Hank.
Thanks. Go ahead, Hank.
Yeah, I'll be as brief as possible because I have to go down and cook dinner. Both the Chinese and the Japanese have very famous treatises on the art of war. And one of the basic tenets of both Japanese Sun Tzu and the Japanese is you have to understand the mentality of the people and environment around you. And if people or governments or leaders or generals are going to or have the potential to oppose you or invade you, the best thing you can do is understand their mentality completely. So to that extent, it does agree a lot with what you said, Mark.
Alex.
Thank you. As soon as you mentioned war, I'm interested. I mean, you say that you said, Hank, that I don't know. Someone said that we don't know war or we don't understand war. I'm one of those sad people that actually follow the Ukraine war in great detail on the Telegram channels. If they showed just 2 minutes of what is going on there on the news every day, that war would have finished by now. Okay, there's been a concerted effort not to show anything there at all. Now, there's a couple of things that the thoughts. Okay, I'm not suggesting I'm right. These are the thoughts I have. At the moment, basically because of our reaction to the war, the Russian economy's picked up. The armaments industry is very good or whatever. They're geared for war right now. So I get the feeling that our side now wants to make us be equal to them in spirit, if not in capability, because we're not. We've used up a lot of weapons on Ukraine, and we're not quite. We didn't get the result we wanted so far. But that's not the point. The point is not the Ukraine war. The point is that, just to take on one or other, is that the best way to avoid war is if both sides are equal in capability, right? And when you have on one side the Russians saying, oh, we're the best at war or whatever, and then you have on the other side not building up the capability that they should, because believe me, the Americans of the West are nowhere near where they should be with arms capability. And I don't support arms, but that's the fact of life. We've got to be equal to deter each other. And then you get people like Ben Wallace, of the ex-defense minister of the UK, saying, oh, we should split Russia into 30 countries. And a couple of your senior politicians said the same thing. It gives the Russians the opinion that they have no choice but to fight whilst they've got the upper hand. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but that's the rhetoric at the highest level. At my level, my normal, when I talk to people, nobody gives a flying monkey about anything over there. We're not going to, I say to them, we wanted Ukraine to go and fight for us. Okay, let's go to war. Let's go in Ukraine and fight for the Ukrainians. And everybody says, oh, no, you know, just support it. It's just a whole load of things that have happened at a higher political level that are totally wrong, in my opinion. And I think it's going to lead us to war, whether we like it or not. But those are just my random thoughts. I'm not qualified to say any of this, by the way. I just those are the thoughts I have.
Alex, thanks for going there. I'm fascinated by, unfortunately, war over time as well. And I've been watching the Telegram channels, probably some of the ones you're watching, and following the Ukraine situation really closely as well. Two things I just wanted to put in the conversation. One of them is media's effects over time. The Civil War is really interesting because this photographer, Matthew Brady, goes to the battlefields, and at the time you have to sit and pose for a picture for a minute. Film is not the same as today, so there are no action photos, there are no movies of the Civil War, there are only photos of bloated corpses in ditches at Antietam and other places, because Brady, who was also a really good portrait photographer, but he went to battlefields and took some of the first photojournalistic pictures that then showed up in newspapers. And before that moment in history, the general public's, the Gen Pop's assumption about war was that it was kind of heroic and kind of foggy. And we had painters, we had actually battlefield painters was a category of type of painter who would go and try to represent what happened in a particular battle. And of necessity, they would conflate and misrepresent the kinds of things that happened on the battlefield and all the different, you know, things that were going on into one painting. And uniforms were bright and glorious. War was made out to be this heroic adventure that people went on, and that started to dissolve pretty quickly when Brady's photos hit, and everybody was like, "Oh crap, this is really disgusting and horrible." That then escalates over time to the thing that Mark was putting in the chat a moment ago, which is correspondence in the jungles of Vietnam showing the desperate nature of the battles there, and also some of the, you know, the major ambushes and horrible things that happened were carried in some measure semi-live by video that was then new and big. And CNN makes its reputation by being able to put a video camera anywhere on the planet faster than anybody else and broadcast that signal back to a live feed. That's what makes CNN, right? Now we have, everybody's carrying a high definition video camera, and we get way too much footage of way everything. Add to that factor that in Ukraine, there are observer drones and other kinds of things. We have footage, up close and personal live action footage of horrible things happening on the ground that we didn't have before. We didn't have eyes in the sky everywhere cheaply, easily. You had to have a helicopter or rent a helicopter to get up above the battlefield or something. And I want to combine that with human nature, which adapts very quickly to things. When you've seen the 3,000th Sally Fields ad to support Save the Children, you're immune to that pain. And Alex, you said earlier, if we showed only a couple of minutes of what's happening on the ground, I don't know, I'm not sure, but I do know that nobody seeing the gore of the children's bodies at Sandy Hook Elementary School has probably helped propagate we do nothing about, you know, child violence and stuff like that. I'm unfortunately in favor of showing some of the absolute nastiness that is done by these new weapons that and the ability that we can let Sandy Hook happen without reacting in some large way blows my mind. Really was hard for my ideas about humans. And so sorry for the longish thing, but I wanted to say both media has shifted dramatically, and even in this last little bit dramatically, because of the eagle eye view we have on a lot of things that still is going to get better, I'm convinced. And humans are so adaptable that these things wear off very quickly, and we don't immediately propel ourselves to change because we see something, we just get immune to it, in part because it's so hard to bear. And I think the human soul has a very hard time seeing and staying with things that are really, really difficult to see.
Jay, very quickly,
Yeah.
I've been on 4chan for a very long time, and there are people who are into gore porn.
Yeah.
It's sick.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, there's all kinds of human nature, and I don't want to make this very long, but I agree with you, and at the same time, I don't want these people to get off on it. I mean, I don't know what to do.
I think it's a really, really hard question. And it's a question that journalistic ethics have to cope with all the time, and I'm not sure they do a good job of it at all. um, uh, you know, if you're going to overthrow your government, no better time than when some other big news event is eating the news cycle, because the news won't look at you, right? And these are some of the things that are affecting everything that we're talking about. Earlier in the chat, Gil and others were like, and Hank had to leave to cook dinner, but I'm pretty sure Hank means that Putin's ambitions are to roll more than through Ukraine. We have friends in Estonia. If I were living in Latvia, Lithuania, or Estonia, I'd be a little worried right now. I think that the last thing Putin would want is for the Finns to attack, because there's this really, really long border that Russia has with Finland, and the Finns have done very well against their Russian enemies over time, but that's a whole different conversation. Anyway, it may be too much, but there may be a topic for us here for a future OGM call just about the prospects for Europe and the Middle East in terms of conflicts and stuff like that. I was in a conversation yesterday that Mika Sifri was part of, and he was kind of saying things that I knew had happened, but putting them together in a way that the map of the Middle East has changed dramatically, and is going to have long-term repercussions in different ways that are hard to predict right now. Go ahead, Gil.
There's a lot there. I kept putting my hand up and taking it down.
Yeah, sorry about that.
And down. If you were in Estonia, you would not be a little bit worried.
Yeah.
You would be a lot worried. I posted further up in the chat a conversation between John Mearsheim and Alexander Dugin. Dugin, for those who don't know him, is Putin's whisperer. He's Putin's Bannon or Rasputin, or call it what you will. He's the strategist behind the Putin strategy, and he is, you know, to very oversimplify, is an argument for the restoration of the Russian Empire, not the Soviet Empire, but even back further than that, Russian Empire. I haven't heard the whole conversation, but at one point he's saying, look, you guys think that Putin is not going to use nuclear weapons? He's entirely prepared to use nuclear weapons, says Putin's advisor in public. So make of it what you will. You know, well, two things. To the conversation about do you study war to ensure peace? And David, thank you for posting that beautiful video of Papa, what's his name, singing "Ain't Gonna Study War No More." And yes, and still, you know, my friend in Switzerland got iodine tablets this week. It would be irresponsible for him to not have them. Is that creating a war mentality? Is that protecting people? Don't know, but there you go. If you're in Estonia, you know, I did a quick chat GPT off of Hank's comment about Europe preparing for war, and there's a lot there that's substantive and kind of scary at the scale that seems to be happening. Where did I want to go with this? Longer conversation for another time, but the perceptions on Ukraine are really different east and west. We see Russian incursion into a free country. They see, according to Putin and Dugin, a NATO incursion into their vulnerable belly. Peter Zion observes that Ukraine is on this plain of like a 300-mile wide plain where Russia does not have mountainous protection from incursion, and feels very vulnerable from that, and saw the Ukraine moves as a serious vulnerability for their long-term posture. That's one view. The other view is that they're expansionists and moving west to rebuild the Soviet, if not the Russian empires. And if they take Ukraine or significantly take Ukraine, the Baltics are wide open to them. Poland, more than Germany, has been making major preparations for possible Russian incursion. So you have two very different views of what's happening on the ground. Very different views of what happened in the Ukrainian elections 10 years ago. I don't have a clear perspective on what it is. And Alex, I also don't have a clear perspective on what you said about show the footage for 2 days and the war would be over. Show it to whom and who would do what to end the war. I just don't understand what you said.
Alex, if you want to expand.
Can I clarify? Okay. At the moment, the way our news cycle works and the way I think the politicians want us to think is that there's a brave band of Ukrainians fighting the horrible Russians, right? It's a line, strap line. It is something that happens over there. Nobody knows anything about it really. And the first thing I was trying to say is, if you see the horror of war, have you seen a tank being fired at 10 people from 20 yards away? What's left of them, right?
I get that.
If you have that, that's the horribleness of it.
Are you saying that if the horribleness was shown on the news, that NATO would stop its support for Ukraine? Is that what you're saying?
Hold on. No, it wouldn't stop support for Ukraine. What I'm saying is the population will sort of try and say, hold on, there's something wrong. Yeah, whatever the rights and wrongs of the situation, there is something horrible happening there that's not our norm. It's not our norm to be doing that to each other, whether we're Russian or Ukrainian or anything else. So that's it's the general mentality, because at the moment we have the people Hank spoke about, and we have politicians every day, literally every day in Europe. We're going to have war. We're going to do this. We're going to give more money to Ukraine, whatever, right? But do we realize that what it means is that we're going to end up into slabs of meat, like what's happening in Ukraine and Russia today? Nobody thinks of that. Nobody ties the one and the other. It's just news cycle over there. That's what I mean, is the politicians won't be as free to say, oh, we're going to be in a war tomorrow or whatever. Because to me, it's an insidious thing to say that we'll be in a war in 5 years. If you want to say we'll be in a war in 5 years, you're actually saying to the Russians, please attack us now, because in 5 years we'll be able to beat you. I mean, personal thinking, that's how I personally think about it. I don't think they should be saying things like that. They should be building up their armies behind the scenes or whatever. But there's some discontinuity about what's going on with the whole narrative around this. And that's beyond going to the rights and wrongs or whatever, if there is a right or wrong anywhere in the Ukraine situation. I'm just saying that the politics of it and the general culture of people, they don't know how much killing. There's probably 1 million people have died in Ukraine. 1 million people. That's not all died and maimed, seriously maimed. That's not the odd number of people here or there. It's 1 million people. What does that mean to you?
Alex, but you're not answering the question I asked you. Are you saying that if that was visible on the media, that Europe would withdraw its support for Ukraine, or what?
No, I'm saying we would have probably Ukraine would have stopped fighting, and Russia would have got what it wanted. We wouldn't have a war, and that's anymore. No more killing. But at the moment, we're just killing for the sake of killing because Ukrainians are brave enough to keep on fighting. Why should they carry on if we're not prepared to go in and help them? Why should they keep on dying if we're not prepared to go in and help them? On the promise that they'll all die away in 5 years, we're going to go in and beat the Russians. What kind of logic is that? And what I'm saying is the fact that we don't have the full picture means that the politicians can carry on getting away with this picture.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. I have a fairly different interpretation than you do, but
Yeah.
about that.
And this has turned into a hearty discussion about impending conflict and so forth. And I would ask that for the last 10 minutes of our call, we kind of pull back a little bit and think back on the quality of our conversations, and let's go a little bit back to our original topic, because I'm interested in us improving the nature of how we engage, and in helping do that in other settings, in other places as well. Cool. So Mark, I don't know which direction you wanted to go in.
Exactly that direction, Jerry.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to try to tie Alex and Gil together a tiny bit. Where did
Hopefully not in a small room.
Well, Chinese finger trap.
So perfect.
There's a book out there.
Sorry, Mark, can I just say, Gil and myself get on very well, I believe, maybe until this point, but up to now, we're close friends.
I completely understand that.
We still get on very well, Alex. We may just disagree, but we still get on very well.
You are both incredibly valuable in my mind and heart in this group, and you're making excellent points. Alex, I might disagree in terms of cause and effect. And I was just going to make the point, there's a wonderful book, I don't remember exactly who wrote it, called Media, the Second God. And that tells it all in one book title. There's billionaires in control of media. There's not Walter Cronkite on the night.
Tony Schwartz.
Thank you. There's not Walter Cronkite in the nightly news that I'm watching with my parents as a 12-year-old or a 7-year-old watching napalm and atrocities in Vietnam. I saw that. That influenced me. Kids today, they're not seeing that. They're not seeing things like that. Unless, they're on 4chan, and 4chan has whatever you want to see. And I'm sure there are many other places, including, dark nets and the Department of Defense, who sees a lot of this stuff. They're professionals. I trust them. So far. I don't want to be seeing that stuff. At the same time, I need to be human, to be fully human at this time. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. I think Tony Schwartz, now I'm looking at his Wikipedia page, and I don't see the book that you mentioned here, so I might have the wrong Tony Schwartz, which I don't want to do. But I think he's also the creator of the Daisy ad, the nuclear bomb ad that happened way back when. I think in the Goldwater campaign. I'm not positive.
But I think there's several Tony Schwartzes.
There are, but this one was a media.
This one was that one, yes.
Yeah, this one was a media theorist who might well have written a book, Media, the Second God, but it's not in his Wikipedia page, so I'm going to make sure it's the right Tony Schwartz. Anyway, thanks for that. Stacy.
Yeah, just to bring it back to the personal a little bit, and this, I think it ties into what Alex was saying. I had to go off camera because I found myself getting really emotional because I just recognized how detached we are from our emotions. And I say collectively, we are, it's a coping mechanism to the story I shared with you in Neo books, that idea of having to kind of harden your heart in order to survive. The other thing I wanted to point out is when I hear talk about understanding the enemy, I just want to say that, it seems like there, and I'm going to call it a patriarchal slant, to understand the enemy with the intention to be able to use that vulnerability, which is very different than like how Daryl Davis, who you interviewed, Jerry, tried to understand the enemy in order to assuage the fears. So that's what I wanted to share.
Love that. Thank you. Just for anybody who doesn't know, Daryl Davis is one of my heroes. He is our heroes. He is a black jazz pianist who has a garage full of Ku Klux Klan robes. Because some 35 years ago, he was playing honky tonk in a bar, and a white guy comes up and leans on the piano and says, "Hey, never heard a black guy play Jerry Lee Lewis so well before." And they get to talking. And it turns out this guy's a Grand Dragon in the KKK, and a whole bunch of other stuff happens. But if you look up Daryl Davis online, I'll put a link to him in my brain in the chat. He has done a lot of good in the world by melting the opposition. And there's a documentary about him. And toward the end of the documentary, two young male black activists are interviewed. And they don't like Daryl's approach at all. They think Daryl is talking to Satan. They think Daryl is engaging with people who don't deserve to be engaged with.
Mhm.
And I find that really, really, really interesting because I like Daryl's approach. I think Daryl is doing the right thing. So anyway,
Jerry, really quickly,
yeah.
I grew up with the sexual revolution. It really warped my mom. And also gays in high school. And there were so many different political, and there still are, LGBTQ, RPTS, DLW groups that are the separationist queers. You know, all breeders must be avoided. Radical lesbian feminists, all men should be castrated. I mean, it's boy oh boy, can we all get along?
That is the question. Rodney King, thank you for leaving that for us all.
Oh, one thing before we go.
Yes.
I'm sorry. You'll be getting an invite, but I just want to mention that on Friday, the December 27th, on the Radical Call, we're going to be having a short memorial for Stuart. So we will send out an invite, but I just wanted to give you a heads up here.
Thank you. And just in case anybody's missed it, Stuart Levine passed away last week, I guess. He had been he had been fighting cancer for quite a while and was in remission, and then it came back pretty ferociously. April met him through Barrett Kaler, her publisher, because he had published multiple books and helped other people write books through Barrett Kaler. They had their annual meeting online a couple days ago, and after the meeting, they had a tribute to Stuart, where a bunch of people hung out, and I sat in on that for a while. It was really lovely. Stuart's sister was on that call, as was his girlfriend of the last 4 years, Jennifer Abrams, who was delightful. And Stuart was really deeply loved, and he was a loved member of OGM as well. In fact, several people in that group were like, "Yeah, Stuart just really loved you guys. This was, this was a home for him." So
As a related cancer survivor, this affects me.
yeah. Ken, after all that, I'm going to ask, hast thou a poem for us, as thou often dost?
I do indeed. Kindness, Naomi Shahib Nye. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel to where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore, only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread, only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend.
Thank you.
Let's all be kinder to each other and to ourselves and to our planet.
And to our opposites. Yeah, thank you. I was concerned with where we'd gotten to sort of 10 minutes from the end of the call, and that's a lovely way to step back into the day. Really appreciate it, Ken.
My pleasure.
Thank you all. See you in a week.
Thank
Happy
you.
solstice
See you all.
Happy solstice, that's right.
or happy Merry Christmas, Kwanzaa.
Yeah. For Hanukkah.